So I was trying over the weekend to get a idea of how all these new electronics that I'm putting into the car are going to interact. And this is the rough wiring diagram that I came up with. So you can see I've got the two fans here, and I'm going to address those first. Those seem to be pretty simple. I have the transmission, which has a controlling unit that's going to be mounted over here. I have the sniper system, which is going to interface with actually part of the electric fan system, because it has the ability to turn the fans on and off at different temperatures. So I may use that instead of the actual sending unit that's in the DeWitt's radiator, or I may use one of the fans off of the DeWitt's radiator and one of them off of the sniper. We'll see how that works out. It appears that the DeWitt's is, I'm guessing, 195 degree that it kicks on. The sniper has a little more leeway than that. I think I mentioned it. The other thing that I didn't mention yet is the vintage air conditioning system, which again needs to be wired back to the battery and to the compressor, and there's a switch in here somewhere that interacts with the electric fans, I believe. So I haven't figured all that out yet, but I decided I'm going to start to run some of the wires, because that's the only way I'll start to sort it out. And as long as I have enough length on those wires, I think it will be just fine. So I got a DeWitt's radiator for this thing, and it came with, I got the dual electric fan option on it, and it came with two wiring harnesses, and they both came in boxes, and it looks like these are supposed to be marked in that white box as to which one it is. The top one says fan relay harness. The one below it in the middle says 185 fan harness. It gives a part number 185 FH, and the bottom one is 195 fan harness, part number 195 FH. This box is not marked at all, and it came with the contents of the top option, the fan harness. So there's no thermostat in it. Second one isn't marked in any of the boxes, but on a tag it says 195 FH, which would lead you to believe that it does come with a temperature sending unit that's 195 degrees, but no temperature sending unit in this box. So I looked at the box with the fan, and maybe I can show it here. I'm sorry, not the fan, but the radiator, which does in fact have the electric fans attached to it. So this is the radiator, and I don't know if you can see it down there. I'll try to shed some light on it. There is a temperature sending unit right there attached to the radiator. So I'm going to assume that that's the 195 degree one. because that's the only marking on that one box. So these wiring harnesses come like this, all wrapped up. They've got a relay, and the relay is included, which is kind of nice, and has a rough wiring diagram on it, but unless you really know relays, I think it's pretty much useless. Nevertheless, the harness is wired correctly for that relay, and then there is a little pigtail that goes, after having looked at the wiring diagram, it goes between the output. This is the heavy current wire, so the big red wire coming out of the harness, and then there's this pigtail from here to here that connects via this connector to a pigtail that comes out of the fan. Now there's two pigtails because there's two fans. You can see them right here on the diagram. But one of my concerns was, you know, they make these harnesses, and the Corvette's kind of unique because it has the battery behind the rear seat, and the fans, of course, are in the front. But when I took this out, and I kind of hung it up so that you could see how long it is. So the yellow wires, the yellow wire and the red wire are the heavy-duty wires. Yellow feeds the heavy-duty current to the relay, and the red takes it from the relay to the fan. But the nice thing about this, these seem to measure at about 12.5 feet long. So it gives you the option of wiring it pretty much anywhere in the car, because it's not that far from the front to the battery. So I took a quick measurement, and I did it on the driver's side, but that's where the battery is. But I took it from the front of the headlight back to the front of the battery compartment, and that is about 12 feet. Now you're not going to be able to run that wire straight. You got to go around bends and find a good place to go through the firewall and, you know, through the interior of the car. So you need more than that. But the point is, if, let's say, I can run the yellow wire from the battery, and if you've been following along with the channel, when I took the air conditioner out and the air conditioner wiring harness out, which is going to be replaced by the vintage air system I'm putting in, they had me remove 2 plugs from the firewall here and here, and that's where the stock wiring harnesses went through. Well, the vintage air doesn't use those. They provided 2 plugs that go in there. So what I think I'm going to do is, since those holes are there and I've got plenty of wire, I'm going to run my wires through that hole by drilling a hole in the plug that goes in there and then running it to the back of the car, to the battery compartment. And then I'll have to find a place to mount the relays that works, but there's going to be plenty wire to go around the corners and get back to the radiator so that I can power the fans. You know, I'll just have to mount that relay in a position where I have enough yellow wire to get back to the battery compartment, and I have enough red wire to go from there to the electric fan. So I'm going to see if I can find a way to make this a bit easier. Maybe I'll see if there's another place I could go through the firewall that would make it easier, but I think my intent, I'm going to have several wires going back to the battery compartment, and it will require a little bit of investigation, but I'm thinking of if I can make a hole back here. This is where the console mounts in. If I can make a hole that will be under the console and feed all the wires along the console past the emergency brake lever and up through under the console for the shifter, and then that will put me right up under there, which, oh, there you can see the light shining through the one of the two holes. I've got my flashlight, my spotlight out there. See if I can. That's not the holes. Those are the two holes right there, right in the middle of the screen. So I should be able to run all my wires right down along that channel. And if I can't, sorry for my hand in the way, if I can't go through the, this is metal, and it goes into the compartments in the back. I'm not sure you can't see that. Let me get a flashlight. Okay, so again, this is where I was saying possibly drill a hole for the wires to go through and put them in a wire loom so that they won't get cut. And then it goes back into the compartments that hold the jack. The storage compartment goes here, but it has a liner to it. And then it goes over to the battery compartment. And you can see in the battery compartment there's already a bunch of wires in there. So that's my plan for how I'm going to run those wires. There will be several that go through to the battery because the fans want connected directly to the battery because you need a 10 gauge wire. The Sniper fuel injection wants a direct connection to the battery. What else am I adding here? Adding controls for the, I'm adding the air conditioner. That needs a pretty good size wire, I think. So there's a number of wires that are going to go back there, and hopefully I can get them all through one of these holes. And then the other thing that needs to go back there is the control for the transmission. Trying to remember exactly what. No, I'm sorry, it's not the transmission. It's the handheld programmable unit for the Sniper fuel injection. It needs a bigger hole So I'm thinking that I can somehow make that work in the other hole. So all my power wires in one, and then the other is going to be for the sniper wire. It's a heavier cable. Might have to drill a hole, 3/8 of an inch or something, and maybe even slit it on the side to push the connector through, because the connector's even bigger than the cable. Now, some of those things require a 12-volt source that's switched with the ignition, and it has to be powered in the start position as well as the run position, especially on the sniper, because without that it's not going to work and the car's not going to start. I think the ideal wire for that is this heavy-duty wire that went to the ignition. I do not need it because I am using the sniper distributor, and it gets connected into the sniper wiring harnesses without the use of that wire. So that's an ideal spot for me to get 12 volts when it's cranking and when it's running. So I'm going to put the camera down for a bit and think about this just a little bit more before I start running wires through that plug. So this is the Sniper EFI, and this is their Hyperspark distributor, and it does indeed have a pink wire that is supposed to go to an ignition hot. As you can see, it's spliced in with these other two terminals. So that wire is ideal, in my opinion, for powering the whole sniper system in terms of getting a switched input that basically triggers a bunch of relays throughout this system and gets power to the whole sniper system. So I started to drill holes in the plug that's going in there, and 13/32 is, I think that was the size. I used this perfect size for fitting those the fan wires, the radiator fan wires through. So I decided, well, while I'm drilling those, I don't want to have to try to drill that after I've already inserted some wires in it. So started looking at the other wiring harnesses. This is the controller for the automatic transmission that I got. It's an overdrive transmission, programmable, shift points, etc. And that takes a big wiring harness. This is what plugs into the unit I just showed you. And then it's got three main harnesses, which are way more than long enough to fit it anywhere that you need to put it. I'm glad they're long, but I'm going to have to struggle to find some places to loop some wires around and kind of get them out of the way. But that's an easier problem to solve than having a wire that's too short and then you have to extend it, which I may have to do in some cases here anyway, because let's just go through the connectors on these. Some of these I don't think I will be using because there's a CAN connector right here, and that would be for a more modern computerized car. So this was provided to me for a 76 Corvette, so I'm assuming I just don't use that one. Okay, and now the rest of these I probably use. This one is a TISS, which stands for Transmission Input Speed Sensor, and that would plug into the transmission. And then this is the main jack that goes into the transmission. And again, that's got to be almost 6 feet of cable, so I'm going to mount that control unit probably under the hood, since the space inside the Corvette is really limited. Okay. Moving on to the other outputs from this segment of the harness is one for a transfer case, in case you have four-wheel drive, and then there's a TOS, or transmission output speed sensor. So I suppose the input speed sensor and the output speed sensor are what the control unit uses to adjust shift points and etc. Know what gear it's in and so on and so forth. Then there's a TPS, throttle position sensor. This has to be connected to the throttle speed sensor, and so does the sniper unit that I bought. So they provided me with 2 plugs. I believe what the purpose of this is you plug one onto the speed sensor and then plug the other one into the come on, brain, get with it, to the sniper system for its throttle position sensor input. So I told them before I purchased it that that's what I was planning on doing, and this is what they provided with me. It looks like 2 plug-and-plays. Now this one, I'm not sure what, this is a fuse. I'm not sure what it protects exactly, but again, another 5 feet of cable, and you have a bunch of wires here. It has tack in, so it takes a tack signal from, in this case, it will be the sniper system. And I'm hoping that the sniper system can power both this and the electronic tack in the dashboard. Okay, there's a ground. A speedometer at for an electronic speedometer. I'll just have to tape that up so it can't short out on anything. The mode LED. Now there are a couple of programs, I'll say, that you can set in this transmission. Maybe you want one for city driving and one for competition driving. So there's a switch, a mode switch lead as well, and the LED is to light it up. And looks like maybe one more. Switched 12 volts, so that needs to go to a 12 volt that's on, at least in the run position, probably also in the the start position. Now, I don't know if I'm going to connect that to this wire that went to the distributor on the HEI distributor with the rest of the Sniper stuff, because Sniper wants a clean signal without anything else attached to it, and I'm a little reluctant to use that for that. And I probably have a couple other things that I have to wire in anyway, like the air conditioner. That's going to require a switched 12-volt lead. And actually the relays for the electric fans also require that. So I may be adding another fuse block, if you will, that I wire into just an ignition on source, other than the one that I'm going to use for the Sniper, and then just wire all those into the fuse block. So what this started out as is me trying to figure out what I need to put in and out of the car. And I'm thinking the only thing that this needs to be out, I shouldn't say out in the engine bay, but it needs a lead from the engine bay into this wire, which I'm thinking is going to be on the interior of the car, because most of this stuff is able to be done there. Ground, ignition, the mode switch and the mode light all belong inside, because you want to be able to press that at any time. And the mode switch, I'll see if I can dig it out. So this is what the mode switch looks like. You can see it says AB mode. You just press it and it switches modes. I think you might have to hold it a second or two, so that you can change your shift points and such. It's pretty simple wiring. It wants a ground, and then the red wire and green wire go to the green wire goes to the AB mode switch wire on that harness I showed you, and the red wire goes to the LED wire of the harness. And just for grins, I'm gonna see what color they are. And no, they didn't. They didn't match them up. Well, I see why. Because the 12-volt switched wire for the controller is red, so you wouldn't want to wire those together. The LED light, it looks like a blue with a red stripe maybe. And the mode switch, looks maybe, well, that looks blue too, with maybe a brownish stripe. At any rate, when it's time to wire these, I will make sure that I get those wired to the correct leads on the harness. So apparently, because this is all I see, the power source, this must not consume very much power because it's that little red wire there that turns on with the ignition. So that was an interesting description, I guess, of how this gets wired into the car. But the bottom line is I'm going to end up using the other plug with a bigger hole. Looks like it takes a 3/8 inch hole for that one part of the harness to go through. And the other thing I will do is there needs to be a connection between the tachometer and that one wire that was the tack in. I believe they called it. I may be wrong about that, but so that little wire, I will do one of two things depending on how hard it seems to be. I might just tap into the tack wire that plugs into the back of the tack, or I may come back through the firewall through this plug to tap it into the wire that connects to the sniper system. So that bunch of wires leads to a circuit breaker, 30 amp I believe, on the air conditioning harness. The red wire goes to the positive terminal of the battery. The two white wires go to the negative terminal of the battery. They're grounds. Okay. The blue is what actually signals the compressor to kick on through a binary switch. Actually, I think I have a trinary switch, but I haven't found it yet in the boxes, but it was ordered. The only other thing that goes through the firewall and is not on the inside of the car in the Corvette, so this drawing was a source of confusion for quite a while for me, because it looked like the wiring harness was going to be set up so that it expected the battery in the engine compartment and everything else pretty much except for the safety switch and the heater control valve to be in the engine compartment. I don't know if I said that right. But at any rate, that's not exactly how it's set up. This drawing represents how it functions, but not how it's physically set up, because I have enough wire on this harness to go back to the battery, and then some I'll have left over. And then the blue wire is a good, it's a good 7-8 feet, and that is more than enough to run through the firewall and out to the safety switch. Okay, most of the rest of this can stay under the dash. Let me get my instructions here so I can read them. But you've got a relay which it tells you to mount under the dash. The plug from the relay is actually a red and green wire, and according to the wiring diagram, let me find it. the red and green wire go to the heater control valve. Now, it has a huge plug on it, but the rest of it is this little wiring harness here, and this might have to go through the dashboard, or the firewall rather, or this other side of it that it plugs into on the heater control valve. So that's all that needs to go through for that. And the other thing, as I said, the blue control wire for the safety switch has to go through. Other than that, you've got a yellow and orange wire, which the instructions say they're not used. It has a gray wire, and it says that's used for programmable controls if applicable. Now, I don't believe I have programmable controls in this unit. So we got a red and white wire with a connector that goes to the blower motor. As in this picture right here. So that stays under the dash because the blower motor is integrated into the evaporator housing and heater core housing and all that stuff. The violet wire that can stay under the dash because I can run it to a ignition source. In other words, something that's... Actually, I could probably do that with accessories too, because you wouldn't want to turn the air conditioner on while you're cranking. That doesn't make sense. And the tan wire is for a dash backlight, which I am pretty certain the only function of that is to light up the controls for the heater and air conditioner. So here's what the controls look like. The first lever is the fan speed. The second lever is dash, floor, or defrost, and it blends between dash and floor and defrost. And then the air conditioner heater control, okay, is just cold and hot, and it controls both. The way it works is if you want a heater, you take it all the way to hot and then you adjust your temperature. If you want air conditioning, you take it all the way to cold and adjust your temperature. So that plugs in, has a harness on it that all this can run up under the console, and it goes to the evaporator housing. There's the control wiring harness. So that stays under the dash. So the only two things that need to come out, as I've said, are the wires for the heater control valve to shut off the hot water flowing from the engine into the heat exchanger in there, the heater core, and the blue safety switch that then goes on to the compressor. So that powers the compressor. So that appears to be the only two things that need to come out. I'll have to make a slightly bigger hole for this little harness to go through. This guy right here. That's it's the smallest piece. And once I get that, I wonder if I could take that cover off that and slip that wire through without making a big hole. I might have to do that. It appears it's only clipped on. Might take a look at that. Okay, on closer examination, this cover here is one piece. You'd have to remove those screws, and this appears to be the shaft of the valve, and there's probably a gear under there. So I don't want to take that apart and take a chance on voiding the warranty just to get a smaller hole through the dashboard. So when I was looking at this wiring diagram, it said the gray wire is used for programming controls if applicable, and I didn't think that I had them, but in looking at the papers that come with the control panel, I do, and you have to use that to calibrate the control panel, and there's a procedure you go through to calibrate it. But the big thing is there's a white jumper wire here that you connect to this gray lead, and then you go through the process to calibrate it, and then you disconnect it and you tape this up so that it can't contact anything else. So I'm going to have to make sure that when I mount this, that when I get this all back together, I'm going to be able to access that wire. And maybe I'll do that by actually making a longer jumper wire to do the same thing that this one does, because it's just got a grounding screw and then it has a spade terminal on the end. So I could make one that I could use that would be easier to reach, or even a jumper with a spade to go in here and then a female connector like this on the other end, so that I could plug it into here. But I have to have this in a position when it's installed that I can reach it to program the controls. So before, when I was drilling the holes for the wires for the radiator fans, I said this was a 1364-bit that I used to drill. It's actually 11. And now I'm going to try an 11/64 for this wire that goes out to the safety switch of the compressor. And this one, I'm going to have to insert from the inside of the car. Oh, that's a little too small. I'm going to go up a 64th. Okay, that makes it an 1/8. See if we can find my wire again. So an 1/8 will work nicely there. Okay, I think that's it as far as trying to figure out what I've got to do ultimately with the wiring harness for the air conditioner. Next thing will probably be the sniper fuel injection. So on to the sniper wiring diagram. The harness that I have to work with is basically this one here that has the black and the red wires. And then I don't know if they actually show it on here, but there's another blue wire that goes to the fuel pump that comes out of this wiring harness right here. I don't see it on this drawing, but there's a blue wire labeled for the fuel pump. Let me set this up and focus in on. It looks like from where these join the harness, probably have about 4 feet of wire. That is not enough to make it back to the battery, so I'm going to have to extend these 2 wires. For the red one, what I will do is I will extend it using what I'm going to cut off of the wiring harnesses for the electric fans. The black one, I don't know that I have any more black wire that's going to be wasted anywhere, but there should be enough of the yellow wire that's a thick enough gauge to connect it to this, to run it back to the battery. Now, what I'm not seeing here, and maybe I just don't have it, maybe I didn't get it out of the box, is I would suspect that you should probably have a breaker on here, and I don't see one. Now, I have one in the car, and maybe that's an option for connecting that. It's actually connected to a breaker, 30 amp. It looks like it might have been for a power seat, which this car didn't have. So unless I add a power seat, that's going to be an unused lead that I could just wire this into, rewrite it a little bit. The only other connections you have to make here are the blue wire for the fuel pump, and that looks like it's plenty of wire to make it from the firewall back to the tank, and I'll run it similarly. I'll have to do a little extra study on what comes with my fuel pump when I finally get it, which it's supposed to ship September 15th. And then, of course, this is the pink wire that leads into the hot when the ignition is on and when it's cranking. So there's a yellow wire there. It's called a coil wire. The instructions say it's not used. This plugs into the sniper throttle body. This plugs into the lead from the distributor, and with this much lead and the lead from the distributor, that should be plenty to reach. So the only thing I have to take through the firewall here for sure is the black and red for hot and ground connected to the battery, and the fuel pump wire, I guess I should check and see whether it would be better to run it through the passenger compartment, because I'd have to drill holes going at the back, or whether it might be easier to just run it underneath the car if I can get it up out of the way. so that it doesn't get caught up in any of the moving parts under there. So before I actually drill a hole for that in my little plug, I am going to do some investigation on whether this is feasible to run it under the car and keep it safe and out of the way, keep it from getting on exhaust pipes, moving parts, and get it up to the gas tank, because that's where it needs to go. That's where the fuel pump is. So not so fast. There was another purple wire here that was included with that harness, and in looking for where that might go, I discovered that there are a couple more wires that need to be connected from the CD ignition box. So there's my plug all drilled for all the wires that need to go through this one. I'm going to have a bigger wire going through for the transmission in the other plug. But I also made myself a little reference here. I've got 2 holes for the yellow for the fans. I've got a blue for the air conditioner for the safety switch, and then I've got a black and a red for Sniper's main harness, a black and a red for Sniper's capacitive discharge ignition, and I decided to go through the interior of the car to run the fuel pump wire, because there was too much hot stuff, too many moving parts under there that you had to route it up and around. So it'll be easier to just, the back panel happens to be fiberglass, and drilling a hole through that just this size to get the wire through is not a problem, and it's far enough away from the gas tank so that when you drill, there's absolutely no danger of hitting the gas tank. So that's my grommet, my homemade grommet for all the wires going through the firewall. This is plastic, so even if the wires would move, it wouldn't be a problem with wearing them out and shorting out. So that took longer than I thought it would, and as we'll see, maybe that's a video of its own, just figuring out what the wiring ought to be and how best to run it and get it through the firewall.